Hello, everybody, and welcome to In Brief, episode 83, Women Lawyers on Guards. My name is Rio Peterson. I am the bar partnership strategist at ALPS, and today I'm going to be chatting with two fantastically inspiring women, Corey Amron and Corinne Parver. Corinne, thank you so much for joining us. It's great to have you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Rio.
Thank you.
We're
We're happy
really
to be
pleased to be
here.
here.
Wonderful. Before we kind of dive in, I know we've got a really interesting conversation ahead of us today, which I've been very looking forward to for the past few weeks since we had our first chat. But before we started, I wanted to find out if you could tell us a little bit about you, who you are, kind of where you live, where you came from. Corey, why don't we start with you?
Okay, great. Alphabetical order. Um, I live in Arlington, Virginia, right outside of Washington, D.C. I've been here for 40 some odd years. And I work primarily, I'm now retired, but I work primarily for a number of law firms that some of which are no longer around. But most recently retired from the firm of Bory, Sater, Seymour and Peace, which started as a Midwest-based firm here in DC. And I have been working over my 40-year legal career, not only day-to-day clients, et cetera, but also on women's and diversity issues.
Right.
And so, for instance, I was the chair of the American Bar Association's Commission on Women in the Profession, the second chair.
Right.
In 1991, I took over right as Anita Hill was testifying in the Senate at Clarence Thomas's confirmation hearing. So that was kind of a trial by
Oh,
fire.
right.
And so I've also had a lot of, experience working on sexual harassment and things like that. And then fast forward, co-founded Women Lawyers on Guard in 2017.
Right. Right. Fantastic. Corinne, how about you?
I'm also a retired lawyer. First career was as a physical therapist for 15 years before going to law school. So I went to law school primarily because I wanted to work in the health law area.
Right.
My practice when I was a partner in a law firm was geared towards policy regulations as opposed to litigation. And after I retired from practicing law, I was a law professor for close to 10 years, where I created the Health Law and Policy program at American University, Washington College of Law,
Mm.
and enjoyed teaching the young students, and was remained involved with the law school over the past few years, even though I am retired from actually teaching, and joined forces with Corey and our gang of warriors in 2017 to now be the president of Women Lawyers on Guard Action Network.
Got it. So you both retired to then go on to do more incredible things in your post-retired life. Fantastic. So now you mentioned you both founded and you run Women Lawyers on Guard. And so we know that's a nonprofit organization that's been doing some really especially important work around understanding and addressing sexual harassment in the legal profession. And that's obviously what we're here to talk about today. So before we kind of really dig into kind of the deeper part of this conversation, I'd love for the audience to learn a bit more about, what Women Lawyers on Guard does. Kind of what is your mission? Why don't you tell us a little bit about how everything got started?
Okay, so in the end of 2016, I was a member of a national network of women lawyers,
Mm.
and we decided that we really needed to do something, both to protect women's rights that we had worked so hard over 40 plus years,
Right.
and also expand women's rights. into the next couple of years. And so we organized Women Lawyers on Guard that first year in 2017 to bring together our volunteers, because as I said, we have a network around the country, with the legal needs of other nonprofits.
Right.
And Corrine and I went around and met with a lot of nonprofits and asked them what their legal needs were, because we weren't quite sure what exactly we wanted to do something. Um, and frankly, our volunteers didn't know exactly what they wanted to do either.
Yeah.
So this was sort of a marriages made in heaven, and we would match our volunteers with those legal needs. After about a year or so of doing that, we decided we really needed to focus our areas. And that's when we did some very heavy duty strategic planning and came up with 3 areas that we were going to focus on. So sexual harassment obviously was key, because right at that time, Me Too exploded. Um,
Right.
but we decided to also that we were not going to just do one area, but we also picked women's reproductive rights, which
Right.
prescient actually at that time was not exploding, but is of
Right.
course now, and gender and workplace equity. So those are the 3.
Right. And I'm curious to know how was it that sexual harassment and kind of this area was something you both identified as an area that you wanted to be involved in? Is this something that's impacted you, directly in your life? I mean, you both had pretty incredible long careers, so I suspect that at some point you may have encountered this.
Well, as Corey said, the Me Too
Yeah.
explosion made it even more impressed upon us that we needed to speak up for this particular area. And there were other groups that were focusing on, for example, Hollywood and the restaurant industry and the marketing and public relations areas. We thought we needed to focus on the legal profession. And that's because we had heard stories for years, the years that we practiced, that this was a concern with people. And we wanted to be able to represent their interests and try to do something about it. And that's how we got really involved in focusing on the legal profession, because no other group was doing that on a national basis. There were some people statewide doing certain surveys and the like, but not on a national basis. And because we were and are a national organization, that's what we decided to focus on.
Got it.
And just if I could add too, that we
Absolutely.
started to talk to lots of people in the profession when Me Too exploded, and came to determine really that there were those who didn't see it happening in the legal profession, either because it wasn't happening to them.
Mhm.
Um, and so they just thought, well, we have all these policies and we have these trainings, and that's, we're good to go.
Yeah.
And then we talked to other people, and not just young people, who
Mhm.
said, oh my God, let me tell you what happened yesterday to me or to my colleague or to somebody I was in the room with, et cetera. And it was like, ugh.
Yeah.
So that's, we'll get into our survey, but that's kind of what led us to do that.
Got it. Right. Absolutely. So really realizing that, despite best intentions, this is still a very prevalent issue that impacts the legal profession on a wide basis. So let's talk quickly a little bit about WLG's mission. So I know you mentioned that you focus on 3 areas, and kind of what is the overarching mission of your organization?
Well, we have a very broad mission because, again, as I mentioned, we didn't quite know what we were going to do at the beginning. So, our mission is that we are a national network harnessing the power of the law, and to Well, to go after and make sure that people have equality,
Mm,
justice, and there's equal opportunity for all. So it's a very broad mission.
right.
We have a 501c3, which is the one behind me, and we have
Mhm.
a 501c4, which is what's behind Corinne, so that we can do different things in these spaces with the different organizations. And so,
Right.
for instance, obviously we do a lot of programming around these topics. Um, and of course, with the pandemic, we've been able to do that around the country.
Right.
We not only sign on to amicus briefs, but we've also written amicus briefs, particularly one in the Dobbs case on behalf of women lawyer organizations.
Mhm.
Um, which of course was ignored. We do studies, obviously we'll talk about them, and initiatives around these various topics. And of course, we have this network that we activate when, when needs be. Um, and we also advocate, as I said, we have different arms that we can do different types of things, but we've done lobbying and with letters advocating to policymakers. We sign petitions and we get out there and march.
And I've had some really interesting experiences doing that. One of the other things that we do also is work in coalition with other groups. There's
Okay.
out of the University of Texas, the Council on Women in the Law and the National Conference of Women Bar Associations and the National Association of Women Lawyers. And so we have done programs with all of those groups and attended various coalition meetings to learn about what these groups are doing. The American Bar Association also, as Corey had mentioned earlier, has a commission on women in the profession.
Right.
And we are looking to collaborate with them as well.
Right. Fantastic. And so I know we're kind of deviating just a little bit. We will definitely be talking about the survey, but I'm curious to know, so obviously you're doing a lot. You're doing a lot of work. And so is the organization run primarily by volunteers? Yeah, I'm guessing you have a pretty incredible team. Yeah.
Yes, we are 100% volunteer driven. And it's pretty much been the same board of directors
Mhm.
that have been together since its inception. We've had some people go into certain government roles that prohibited them from continuing to be on our board.
Mhm.
But they continue to support us. We have a Facebook presence, we have a LinkedIn presence, and Instagram, trying to make ourselves known via social media. So through that, we get our messages out to the various communities.
Got it. Oh, fantastic. Fantastic. It's really wonderful that you're devoting your time to this undertaking. It's fantastic.
And we're always looking for more to
All right.
grow our network.
Fantastic. And I think at the end of the chat, we'll have a chance to we'll plug and let everyone know where to get a hold of you and how they can participate.
That's super.
All right. So now we've kind of alluded to a survey a few different times. So I would love to dive into that because it's really, really fascinating. So in 2020, I know you published a report titled Still Broken, and that shared the results of the national survey that was conducted by Women Lawyers on Guard. And the intention of the survey was to better understand, not so much the prevalence of sexual harassment, but rather the experience of those affected by it, in addition to uncovering the impact that this has on the legal profession. So I would really love to know if you could share with us some of the methodology behind the survey itself, and I'd expand on how the survey is different from typical surveys about sexual harassment.
Well, we were very fortunate in being able to collaborate with a well-known researcher who is a woman by the name of Dr. Erin Reeves, who is also a lawyer in addition to having her PhD in certain aspects of statistical analyses. And we put together a group that went through the actual drafting of the survey questions, and it took us a good couple of months to be able to go back and forth to hone in on all the areas that we wanted to investigate.
Right.
Sorry.
Yeah. So, what else? My job actually was sending this out and trying to get people to respond to it. So it was not a survey where it was a closed box of respondents.
Right.
It was a survey where we were just trying to get as many people as we could to respond to it, both women and men. And lo and behold, we did get a representative sample, even though we hadn't put that sample together, but we analyzed it afterwards and compared it to the demographics that the ABA keeps about lawyers, and was very representative of all walks of the profession and where people were geographically, and it was print and ages and things like that. So it was we felt a pretty good picture of what was going on. We were also, because we asked people to tell us the sort of 10-year tranche when something that they were talking about in the survey occurred, we were able to measure change over time. And I think that's one of the things about the survey that's been extremely valuable, to be able to say, this was like this and now it's like this.
Right.
We also gave the respondents the opportunity to comment throughout the survey questions. So when it came time to look at an issue of great import, we allowed comments. And when we collated all the information, we gathered literally hundreds of different comments from our respondents and included some of the quotes from their comments in an appendix in the Still Broken report. So I would encourage everyone who listens to this podcast to actually go online to our website and read the report and also the appendices so that they could see the lasting effect of some of the experiences that they went through.
Absolutely. And that's something that really stood out to me when I was reading the report. I think it's very often that we overlook the context surrounding these types of experiences. And I found that really just added so much depth to kind of understanding the issue and just understanding the experiences of those who have been impacted by sexual harassment in their workplace and just in all different ways. It was really unique, I think, the way that you've approached this. Yeah, can you share with us some of the results of the study?
Yes, absolutely. Well, first, I guess I wanted to say some of the positive things that we saw.
Right.
There were some. So, for instance, we asked about the culture of harassment within the person's employment setting. And as I mentioned, these are settings all across the board, everything from the judiciary to academia to law firms and associations, the government, et cetera. And what we found was that at the very least, we gave them choices. They could say it was often part of the culture. In other words, it was just ubiquitous. Or they could say it was part of the culture. So it was within certain departments or groups or whatever. Or they could say it was rarely, manifested itself. And so 30 years ago, we found that the respondents said 51% of these incidents were often part of the culture. 38% just, various departments. And only 10% was it rare.
Right.
And now we found, and these will be easier to see, when the people read the report,
Right.
25% was often. So it went from 51% to
Wow.
25% was often. So that, actually shows that there is change,
Mhm.
and that the change is for the better. However, they also said that 48% part of the culture. So
Mhm.
if you add often and part together, you what you see is that 30 years ago, 89% of these cultures had either often or in some places in the employment setting,
Mhm.
whereas now it's 73%.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it's better, but it's obviously not right. So so
Mm.
that's one of the more positive aspects. Another positive aspect we saw was that we asked about in one place who was doing the harassing, and
Mhm.
we found that a lot less now from professors in law school, and a lot less now from judges in
Mm.
court. So, however, um, um,
And there's
partners,
always a whoever.
Yeah,
however,
there's always a however. Yeah.
partners and supervisors still kind of the similar statistics from 30 years ago. And now there's, maybe somewhat more from clients.
Mm.
Another positive finding was that in comparison over the 30-year span that we asked about, is that there were fewer sexual assaults and rapes nowadays than occurred in the past. Although what we saw an increase in was a lot of verbal comments,
Mm.
name calling, such as, the like. And so there was, plus on one side,
Yeah.
but then again, the bubble expanded in another area where there was more name calling and
Right.
appearance criticisms, etc.
So
Right.
some of the negative um, results that we found were, as we mentioned, it's still insidious, and we called it insidious and alarming,
Yes.
the incidents. Um, and we'll talk about some of these things later, but the barriers to reporting were absolutely identical
Mm.
today as they were 30 years ago. Things like, they didn't think they would be believed, or they thought they'd be retaliated against. Nothing was going to happen,
Mhm.
etc. Um, the price to the people who were harassed, and by the way, most of these people are women, not all of them, but most of them, was just devastating. It was and long lasting. I mean, there was one quote where it's even though this happened once while I was a law student over 30 years ago, it still haunts me.
Right.
So the consequences to the people who are harassed, long lasting anxiety in the workplace, fear of retaliation, loss of productivity, loss of confidence, and in the entire workplace, you find loss of productivity, anxiety, et cetera, things like that. So um, the consequences to the workplace, even if it's not just, the people who are harassed, is consequential. And in fact, so consequential that we made a determination that not statistically, but that the consequences to the people who were harassed was greater than the people who were doing the harassing.
Right. Right. And unfortunately, that sounds that sounds like not surprising.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
hate
unfortunately.
Another major finding that was a little bit surprising to us was that people at every level of the profession had experienced harassment of one
Mm.
form or another professors, judges, have responded to us that in their capacity at really the highest levels of the profession, still have been experienced that kind of harassment.
Yeah.
Partners, general counsel.
Mhm.
Yes, I think that was something that really disappointed and surprised me deeply. You would think that, once you reach a certain level in your career, you maybe garner enough respect that that type of behavior is curbed in others, but that doesn't seem to be the case. And I definitely found that to be very surprising and, discouraging in a lot of ways. I mean, you work really, really hard to get to where you are, and you still have to
Mhm.
navigate that same sort of nonsense it's very disappointing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that, at least the way that we look at this, a sexual harassment is not a sexual thing, it's a
Mhm.
control thing. And
Right.
so people find ways to control other people, whether those people are partners or associates or supervisors or general counsel, whatever. This is a tool that some people use to
Right.
control others. And so, yes, it's somewhat surprising, but maybe not so if you look at it through that lens.
Right. Absolutely. That's an excellent, excellent way to think about it. Was there any other findings that you both found surprising? Kind of.
I think the numbers that we were able to calculate on the issue of reporting sexual harassment, that was a bit surprising that the vast majority of people don't report. Either they don't have the right circumstances in their place of employment for them to report an incident. For example, if there's someone working in a small law firm and there is no HR department, or even if there is, it could be the spouse of one of the senior partners or the named partner of the small firm. How do you go about doing reporting in that circumstance? And so the numbers were really quite staggering as far as many people not reporting incidents.
It's
Mhm.
something like 86% currently are not reported.
Wow.
Hmm.
Wow. That's a very large number. And so I know that kind of the goal of the study is not only, to understand these experiences, but also to kind of take these findings and use them to impact some kind of positive change, right? In the legal profession. And so I'm curious to know, kind of thinking about all these points that we've just touched on, what were some of the recommendations that came about as a result of the survey?
Um, yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, you.
So what do we want to say? You want to make sure we get it all in.
Right. Um, well, I just want to mention three recommendations. There were a lot of recommendations, and Corinne, please, pick up after I finish. Um, the three that I want to mention are the reporting,
Mhm.
because of just the terrible statistics. Something we call transparency, and and also individual accountability. So the reporting, it you can have the greatest policies and training and all that in the world, but if people don't feel comfortable reporting, and of course all the barriers that we just mentioned, then you're not going to hear about it, you're not going to be able to fix it.
Mhm.
So you need not only better reporting mechanisms, you need multiple reporting mechanisms, and you need support
Mhm.
for reporting. That somewhat goes to the culture, but so that has to come from the top down.
Right.
I've heard male general counsels say that if you put better reporting mechanisms into place and your reporting goes up, you're actually doing a good job, because now you're finding out about things that were happening that you did not know about before because there were too many barriers. So
Right.
reporting. The second thing is transparency. And what that means is what the workplace knows. Um, Oftentimes, these in the statistics that we found from the survey, we found that even in the 14% of incidences that were reported, 50% of those, there was absolutely no consequence, and another 20%, the person who'd been harassed was never told what the consequences were. So knowing what happens and what steps the employer took, is key, I think, in, first of all, creating a culture of A, reporting, and B, a lot less sexual harassment.
Right.
But it also, everybody knows that it happened. I mean, if the employer thinks that, this is under wraps and I'm doing my privacy thing by not telling anybody what we did, which
Hmm.
employers do say, oh, privacy, we can't tell anybody. Everybody knows what happens,
Right.
what has happened. And everybody needs to know that something was done about it.
Hmm.
Um, and it doesn't always have to be, the person was fired, okay?
Right.
Which gets to individual accountability.
Mm.
In the most egregious cases, the person actually is let go. And if
Mhm.
it's a law firm, sometimes what happens is they just go across the street with their clients, leaving the firm to clean up the mess, because now there is not only somebody who's been harassed, but now you, and particularly because a lot of these people are rainmakers, right? So
Mhm.
you're
Right.
leaving behind a lot of people who now have no work to do.
Right.
Um, and in the worst possible case, people are suing the employer, and the employer now has to come up with funds to settle these lawsuits. And sometimes the individual goes off scot-free. So there needs to be individual accountability. We've been looking and talking to a lot of people about the ethics requirements and disciplinary requirements, and that's okay as far as it goes. But there has to be a lot more thought given to how to make sure that the individual is accountable to them for
And
what
so
they've done.
the consequences really aren't just for the individual
Mhm.
who was harassed, but to the location of the employment, the place of employment, whether it's even government or a small firm or a large firm. It's the business imperative exists for companies to act properly in informing the employees or partners, but the people in the workplace, what has occurred, because the gossip will permeate the institution. People will
Right.
know, as Corey mentioned, and so the consequences financially and
Mhm.
otherwise are of concern.
But there are also a lot of positive things that employers can do to get ahead of the situation before it gets to that point. So positive reinforcement for mentoring and for, let's say, 360 reviews to, try to figure out what's going on, to putting in place conversations about what is appropriate, what is not appropriate
Right.
in this particular organization. And I know of general counsels who go around, and managing partners who go around to all of their offices to lead by example, and talk about what the culture of the place is. So positive reinforcement, not just always negative
Mhm.
consequences.
Two
Right.
important recommendations that really laid the foundation for the next initiative that came out through the publication of the report and the survey findings is that we need to come up with a creative way in order to make a shift in the landscape. Not that the teachings and other videos, for example, that companies use to inform their employees about the latest EEOC regs or what has happened from the Supreme Court in cases, what the obligations are, the do's and don'ts, focusing mainly on the don'ts, the recommendations to engage in conversations with primarily, at least initially, with men, to involve men and to have men become active allies for their female colleagues. And out of those recommendations came our Conversations with Men initiative.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Which is, I thought, just so creative. So why don't we just, yeah, let's dive into it. Would you like to tell us a bit about it? It's called, the initiative is Conversations with Men. And so what does that look like?
Good segue into
Segue.
which is still ongoing. The power of male allyship is we deem to be quite significant and crucial. And a lot of the work that's being done in the legal profession on these issues has been done by women primarily.
Right.
You'll have a lot of women's initiatives in law firms, and women in charge of mentoring and education that really has nothing to do with the practice of law, but working in legal employment settings. And so that has been something that we wanted to make sure that we were able to develop an initiative that would address those issues.
Right.
Yeah, and we did a lot of research, just looking at who was doing what and what exactly were they doing in the male allyship space. We talked to some of the experts, people who've written books, on the topic, and we convened some thought leaders to talk to us about what we might be able to do. We'll also convened what we called an expert task force. We had people on that task force like Kai Feldblum, who was an EEOC commissioner. She was the author of the seminal work on sexual harassment in the workplace for the EEOC. And we structured, Corinne mentioned that our Still Broken survey was spearheaded by Dr. Erin Reeves. We got her also to help us structure these conversations because we wanted them to be open and honest, with prompts and very thoughtful information. But we also decided, with the help of that expert task force, that the facilitator should be, well, we knew the facilitator was going to be a professional, but we decided that it was going to be a male. And we thought that was important because we wanted no barrier to honest conversation. If they wanted to talk about their locker rooms, go for it. Okay. And so, but we couldn't find a male facilitator that had this expertise. I mean, they're just a tiny handful of these people. So we paired up a professional facilitator who was actually a clinical law professor at Harvard of facilitation and mediation. We paired him up with Dr. Reeves, and together with Women Lawyers on Guard, we structured the sessions.
Right. And so let's talk a little bit more about those sessions. So what did the mechanics of those meetings look like? I know this project is ongoing. So how did it start? What was the first couple sessions like?
Well, we decided that we would ask our network of women lawyers to nominate men to participate in the focus groups. And we sent letters once we had the information about the men they were going to nominate, we realized quickly that everybody was very enthusiastic and accepted the invitation almost instantly.
Which is what you want, right? Ideal.
Right. And so we convened focus groups of 10 men, and each of the focus groups met twice. And so they had an initial meeting with the facilitator. We also had a male note taker who was introduced at the start of the session and then sort of was, blank face afterwards. So that we were able to get notes from each of the sessions. And so
Anonymous, by the way.
Right.
the people did not know each other who were in the groups. We made sure that the groups were diverse in every respect you could think of: area of the country, legal place of employment, seniority, and the like, ethnicity.
Race,
I mean, we try to
ethnicity.
cover, we try to cover every
We had gay
area.
guys, we had a disabled person. Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
had professors, we had judges, partners in law firms, general counsel of corporations. And so we had 50 people, and in the 5 focus groups. They met twice officially,
Mhm.
and the facilitator had a curriculum and encouraged, really, it wasn't a lecture type of curriculum. It wasn't professorial. It was a true conversations that were structured over issues of sexual harassment.
Right. And so for the first session, they would kind of have a discussion and talk about things. And then what happened in the second session?
Well, first of all, before they got to the first session, they were told that they should read Still Broken.
Got it?
We gave them a bunch of resources to look at, but Still Broken was at the top of the list.
Yeah.
And so the conversation centered around, what was happening and what they had read,
Mm.
what they had experienced, the types of prompts that was structuring the discussion. And by and large, these were guys who obviously had had been nominated, right? So they wanted to be there. And by and large, they were shocked and
Mm.
incredulous. They were just like, wow, really? I mean, because they were the ones that really weren't seeing it for the
Mhm.
most part. Now there were some that were working in their places of employment on these issues, but for the most part, these were people who were not seeing it. So in between the first and the second session, they were asked to talk to women in their lives, their relatives, their colleagues at work, their neighbors, whatever, and just to ask them, just talk to me about sexual harassment.
Mhm.
Not were you sexually harassed, but just talk to me.
Yeah.
And to a person, when they came back into the second session, they were blown away.
Mm.
Absolutely blown away. They had no idea that their wife, let's say,
Mhm.
this was the way she comported herself, or this is what the experiences that she had seen, or that just, part of their life, their lived life.
Right.
And so they were extremely, very, very impacted by this.
Mhm. Right. And so you mentioned that initially this was 2 sessions, but that these conversations are still continuing today. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, we had provided the men with some active ally actions that they could take once the 2 conversations were complete. And it was an extensive list of things that they could do. About a dozen or so of the 50 men decided that they wanted to continue the conversations with the facilitator. And they've been meeting now, how long, Corey? Over a year?
Over a year and a half.
Yeah, with the facilitator.
Every month.
Once a month, every month. And we are now seriously trying to plan the next cohort of 50 men.
Yeah. Did it surprise you that they wanted to continue the conversation? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. We were constantly getting feedback
Yeah.
through the notes from the note taker or from our conversations with the facilitator, which we held religiously. And some of the discussions also entered into the area of gender discrimination and the role of women in the legal profession, which was fine with us if the conversations expanded to include that type of discussion. The facilitator always brought the focus back into what of the active ally actions were they engaging in, etc. So they didn't fare too far off of the topic, but they obviously were seeing changes that they were able to impart within their places of employment. And they were just enjoying the camaraderie that was developed, and this is what happened to me in my firm type of discussions.
Right.
So, yeah.
And one thing that I also appreciated, and would not have otherwise appreciated, was how they talked about the nuances of what maybe, like if you were a bystander and you saw this happening, they brought a lot of that into these discussions, and talked over, what should I have done? Or what did I do? And was that the right thing to do? And talking about these nuances, I think made them realize that, not every situation is the same.
Right.
And you can't, you just don't have like one script that you can work off of in every single situation. So I thought that was fascinating that they came to that realization and were very, very attuned to not what necessarily what they wanted to do, but what the person that was being harassed, I hesitate to say needed, but
Yeah.
what from that person's perspective, what might the bystander do?
Yeah. What could be helpful or useful in
Yes,
the moment,
right.
which
And
is,
that led us to develop a bystander intervention toolkit, which we're in the process of finalizing.
oh, fantastic. And I think that's such an important way to help people frame a situation is to perhaps not so much think about yourself in that moment, but how can I be of service? How can I be helpful? And also the importance of recognizing it's a dynamic issue. There's not a one size fits all solution for every situation. And that's a really powerful tool. I mean, it sounds like it's inspired some pretty tangible, positive change, really, at the end of the day. And
Right.
I'm curious to know, how does that make you both feel? You feel accomplished and fantastic about that? Because you should. It's pretty amazing.
Thank you. I think the bystander toolkit will really be of help, particularly when these occurrences take place in a group setting.
Mhm.
One of the things, the surprising things also that we discovered was that it's not just in a single office with one-on-one interactions. It could happen and does happen in group settings. And
Right.
so, if you're a fella and there's 5 guys around and 1 woman and someone makes an untoward comment, how should you react? What are the things that you could say or do and in the moment
Right.
to
Yeah.
either diffuse a situation or we don't talk like that around here and things like
Right.
that. That's very surprising. You should make a comment like that
Yes.
and the like.
And actually, sometimes they are coming to the realization that the person who's being harassed has it under control,
Mhm.
and that it's best not to be the knight in shining armor, zapping in or whatever, being patronized or whatever. So, That's
Right.
also an important perspective, trying to discern the difference between those situations. It's hard.
Right. Trying to navigate the nuances.
Hmm.
Certainly not not a map we're all just born with. So it's very, very
No.
important. Oh, that's fantastic. So we've got the bystander toolkit coming up where you're working on kind of facilitating a second round of conversations with men. What else is next? Is there more on the horizon for women lawyers on guard?
Well, I don't
Go
know that
for
we
it.
can, talk too much without getting our board approval.
So yes, but to be coming soon.
But I think in the other areas that we're working on, the
Mhm.
reproductive healthcare rights is a never-ending avenue for us to give our assistance. And there's been so many court cases that have altered the landscape, and so that is something that's taking up a fair amount of our time right now as well.
Right. Absolutely. It's a massive mountain to scale, that
Mm.
one. So, yeah, well, this is fantastic. So, I know we've got just a couple more minutes left. I would love for you to tell us how people can get involved with Women Lawyers on Guard. Where can they find you? How can they lend their support?
Oh, that's a wonderful question to end with.
Well,
Well,
first, if there's anybody who would like to nominate a guy
Mhm.
for our upcoming sessions, we would love to hear from them. And my email address is camron, so Cameron, CAMRON, at womenlawyersonguard.org. So we'd really love to hear your nominations.
and we'd love to have you join us. There is no fee to join Women Lawyers on Guard. The website is www.womenlawyersonguard.org, where you can see all the reports of the work that we've accomplished thus far, and also take a look at some of the amicus briefs that we've participated in. That's all online. We would love to have your listeners join our mighty band.
And we would love for them to do that as well. And we'll make sure to put the website and your email, Corey, in the show notes so that if anybody would like to get in touch, they have an easy way to do that. And definitely nominate someone to participate in more conversations with men. That'd be fantastic. So, well, thank you both so much. This has been really incredible. It's really incredible work that you're both doing, and I'm very happy we got to discuss it today.
Thank you.
Well,
We
thank
really
you.
appreciate you inviting us.
Yes, and ALPS, has been a stalwart supporter of ours, so we're very appreciative about that.
Oh, wonderful. Well, hopefully once you have the toolkit out and the next round of conversations with men, we can do this again. Keep the conversation going.
That's a
Sounds
date.
good.
Thank you.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. And this has been episode 83 of In Brief, and we will see you next time. There we go. We're done.
Yay.
Wonderful. Oh, thank you both so much. That was fantastic.
But I'm glad that you found it worthwhile. Good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, thank
absolutely.
you for your enthusiasm. It wasn't just like, oh, let's see, what's the next question?
Yeah. Well, it's definitely something I feel is very important and it hits
Yeah.
close to home in a lot of ways. And I'm just so blown away just reading through, the Still Broken and the conversations with men. It's just such a fascinating approach too, the way that you've kind of tackled this issue. It's really inspiring. I've really, really enjoyed kind of digging into your work and getting to talk with you both about this. So yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much.
Especially because there have been some who have looked at the construct that we're trying to bring forth, which is, active ally male allies,
Mhm.
and said that, they can't, not that they can't support the initiative,
Mhm.
but they can't use their DEI dollars for it because it doesn't either A, they can't see the obvious impact on women, or B, they can't spend money on something that is just male oriented. Like, but you don't see the,
Yeah.
Very
the end of the
frustrating.
tunnel. Yeah, it is. It's very
Yeah.
frustrating. So
The very larger picture you're not seeing there. Yeah. Oh, well.
And for us, the funding issue is, it becomes an issue. It's very important that we can be able to garner sufficient funds to keep these programs going, because we don't have a fee to belong to the organization. So
Right.
help like what ALPS has given us in contributions has been very important.
Right. Well, hopefully we can keep that going, keep that support coming.
thank you so, so much.
Thank you.
Great
Absolutely.
to see you.
Great to see you both. So, I will let you know when the episode publishes, and we can tag you in the social posts and get the word out there. Yeah.
Great. Great.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you both so much. I hope you guys have a great day.
Thanks. You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.